you're scarfing it, like it or not. If you think that you aren't, I would urge you to pick that apart, cause you're drinking it, smoking it, driving it, dressed in it. We pay for it, pray to it, bathe in it, fill up the basin, and babies are blessed in it. Ask no questions, bask in the pestilence. See, honey, when the plague goes live, you'd be wise to invest in it. See, honey, when the plague goes live, just between you and I, that's an industry sign that they're all done testing it. And come 2025, they will all be confessing it. And then a few small fry fall guys all fly from the precipice, who were doomed to be wasted like shell corporations, dissolving to vapor, then gone with the resonance, gone with the sense and the sentiments, gone with the dust of the remnants, gone with the ghosts of the regiment, gone like those families in Gaza whose bodies and homes are demolished when Israel sets up a settlement. Gone like your chance at a settlement, gone like the hope of apologies out of those funding our deadliest research and backroom development. Gone like your shot at a measly I'm sorry from the mouths of our own bioterrorists. God, you cannot imagine the face of the monster. You can't even fathom the scale of its carapace. It's under your feet, yet you're barely aware of it. You see, it's quietly judging the scope of your suffering, sizing you up like a therapist. Then it rides in your guts like a parasite, growing in size and excreting a culture that's purely embarrassment. Equal parts Manson and Maryland, equal parts something we push into madness and something we'll gladly exploit and objectify 50 years after it perishes. Carefully crafted and planned and arranged like a monarchy's marriages. Fucking cousins or otherwise, scourge of the colonized, staged and displayed for the sake of retaining those imperial barracks. And all to expedite a special type of anglicized dysplasia. The kind where half the world is waking up to learn they're being raided, raped, and robbed of all their heritage by Charles and his caravan of 30 servants' carriages. The kind where each in the procession is worth infinitely less, till eventually they're paid in sums of crown-approved disparagement and bonuses of shame, till they're finally told to thank the highest-ranking inbred pig named king of every garrison. One who rose into his power all immaculate, like Harris did. Well, now that garishness is melting down like paraffin that hardens in a shell and shelters terrified and threatened royal terrapin. Those that rule with zero question, although nobody elected it. Democracy was here till we dissected it. Democracy was here until the exhibition exodus. And the loss of that democracy is just a threat for those who've yet to recognize the scent of bait or know the taste of desiccants. Democracy was here and now the smear is all that's left of it.
Democracy was here and now the smear is all that's left of it.
Mother and baby on razor's edge, don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. And aide got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. Aide got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, they don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. Aide got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, don't give a shit what your paper said. The economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. And Aide got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Mother and baby on razor's edge, they don't give a shit what your paper said. The economy creeping up out of red as they divvy a shitty little bit of bread. And miles away from that lady's ledge, her senator waking, he's safe and fed. And Aide got a paper to read in bed, jerking him off as they count the dead. Baby on razor's edge, don't give a shit what your paper said. Economy creep creeping about a red. They divvy a shitty little bit of bread. Miles away from that lady's ledge. Her senator waking safe in bed. Ain't got a paper to read in bed. Jerking
Our society and our world are full of these invented and built up and contrived facades. And sometimes some people come along with a hammer and smash that facade. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade.
Welcome to the future. Shit where you please. The Wi-Fi's killer, but there's no more bees. So there's hardly any flowers, there are very few trees, and you'll pay $1,000 for some honey for your tea. But we got these awesome collars, mine's an Apple Model 3. It allows for better movement than the Tesla X Elite. It lets you customize the ads that it implants in every dream. And for premium subscribers, doesn't shock you in your sleep. But it doesn't stop there. It can analyze your speech, and if it hears disinformation, then it notifies police. It's a swift re-education, but it knocks you off your feet like your booster every 7th week. I faced the future boldly with 2 eager open eyes, and I picked a couple nuggets up that blew my fucking mind. Like you can taxidermy someone while they're technically alive, and they'll shine when it's election time. See, the Democratic voter base will pay them zero. Never mind if voting for the scarecrow is a vote along their party lines. They could stare into its marble eyes and claim there's something dignified. Unlike real politicians, this one doesn't need an oxygen or kit supply. But its function is the same as those who came before. The goals are never misaligned. It still spends all its working time performing pre-recorded fleecing sessions where it sugarcoats your slow and hungry genocide, while pouring billions into Nazi coffers, all the while selling you the story that we're moments till the MiGs arrive. So fuck it, ask Zelensky if he'll help replace our leaded pipes. Watch a fleet of Penske's show, stacks of bills in every size. Guess it only took a black sun and a couple hiles. Honorary goose step and some Nazi boots a quarter mile, all while Biden sneers his sordid smile. I don't know what was in this morning's vial, but it makes him stare 1,000 yards through all the prompters and the cards like he can smell the nearest child. His eyes are wide and wild, wider than the grave in which another 1,000 families were tossed in as I typed until they rose up to the sky unceremoniously piled. Which sort of flies right in the face of all this network ticker tape where the American economy has superhuman vitals.
And sometimes some people come along with a hammer.
See, I like to think my trial's gonna play like a recital. I'll denounce the world around me and accuse the most entitled, who weaponize their titles, whose pull is something title, who'd starve us all to death to best delight their blighted idol. So they might destroy the record, and I will never get to vinyl. So my word is not immortal, but it's final.
It's a brilliant, powerful hammer. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade.
of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death and drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections step by step till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from a trip to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer, that 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers, who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. Fed by the fed to the grinder. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. And the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead.
went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your size unstead, and your eyes turn blind to the signs on red. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed, you let it inside, you'll see it, it's fed. Never you'll mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, that it bleeds you dry, that it dines on the dead.
Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
We want to have just an off-the-cuff chat between you and me. Us. We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.
Who are these people?
It's us. We're these people.
I love that intro. I love that intro so much.
I'm here with a different co-host this time, Oz LaFave.
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me on.
Friend of the show, DJ Joe Nice. How are you, friend?
What's good? And you hear Nick say this all the time. The United States is the most propagandized country in the world.
We are so fucked, you guys. Again, I'm sorry for being cynical, but seriously, we're fucked. We are fucked. We are well and truly fucking fucked.
Just appreciate all the work that you do and the platforms that you all are providing.
Hey, you. Doing good. How are you guys doing?
And as independent media, we have a responsibility to be, we don't hide our bias, obviously, but we must stay true to the facts.
What's up, Pam?
Cheers and salutations. Welcome if you got them.
But I am here with a man that I've been waiting to talk to for the last couple of years, Nico House.
As an educator, what I would suggest is that, first of all, podcasts like these are made.
So you need to be an example for the people and for the future, knowing that your words can actually change the future.
What do you feel? What would Kwame Ture feel we would have to do?
Well, politics is every day of every minute. You have to be aware of what's going on. Not voting on one day, so the vote has never meant anything. So I'm not a Democrat.
See, I would call that guy the Black Obama.
No. The issues that we talk about, listen to us.
As always, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
In news.
Is in news. What's up, everybody? It's me, Reef Breland, here with a different co-host this time. It's not Care Bear. It's a Yeti. It's a Yeti Jezus. What's up, Yeti? How you doing?
Too much, man. Doing a lot of gardening. Doing a lot of speaking out against wars and all that fun stuff.
Yep, that's always good.
Lord Nelson.
Sometimes I also report on the wars.
Well, there's been too many to report,
Yes.
So, but anyway, speaking of stuff to report on, you were on Misty's today, I think, right?
I was
should
on
be able to
TNT
check
Radio.
that out on TNT Radio. They should get it up either tomorrow or the next day. Normally, they're pretty good about that. But
Yeah, they're pretty quick.
Got some people in the chat. Got Maleki's here. Got Angel here. Indy's here. The fans are showing up. Make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already. Share the stream if you haven't done that as well. We're shadow banned to all hell, so it's nice getting some support that way. But anyway, we brought some stories this week, Eddie. We got United Nations is warning to close Gitmo. I don't know if you saw that. We've got...
I did. Let's hope that happens.
Would be nice. PRIGOZHIN'S Folly from SEYMOUR HERSH, talking about the attempted coup. Is it even a coup? I feel like it's more like a mutiny at this point, but,
Yeah. A lot of stuff was weird about that in general.
Yeah.
It just, yeah.
So, Biden rehiring a Trump cabinet member, Elliott Abrams, for head of diplomacy. So we got a Caitlin Johnstone article about it. Should be good. And Mint Press, Kit Clarenberg, giving us the scoop on this supposed Chinese police department, which you'll find out is not actually Chinese, as usually these things go. So, anything you want to add before we get into it, Yeti?
No, I think we should get in on to the important discussions.
Yep, I'm down. So, Angel's asking, what is the United Nations actually going to do to close Gitmo? Not a damn thing. They are virtual signaling. We'll see. I'm sure it's strongly worded letters as always, because that's all we tend to get. But
they got their good pens out for writing that one.
Right. So Yumna Rivzi over at Truth Out, a new UN report condemns Guantanamo and calls on Biden to close it. The U.S. government is being given good counsel by the UN expert, and it's time the White House took it seriously. I'm going to tell you right now that's probably not going to happen. They tend to not take things seriously. Last week, Finolia New Owlane, I'm sure I butchered that name terribly, but the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Counterterrorism and Human Rights released a scathing report on her visit to the Guantanamo Bay detention camp. The report, the first of its kind, once again brought the world's attention to the profound, far-reaching impact that the use of torture and arbitrary detention by the United States has had not just on the minds and bodies of former and current detainees, but also on the victims and survivors of 9/11, their families, and families of detainees, because that's who's there. On the same day, President Joe Biden and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken marked the UN's International Day in support of victims of torture by releasing statements condemning torture and emphasizing the importance of upholding human rights and accountability, as the U.S. urges other countries to put an end to torture and provide redress to victims. The new UN report is a glaring reminder that the U.S. must meet its international obligations to do the same. The Biden admin is the first to allow a UN expert to visit Guantanamo, demonstrating commitment to its promise of closing Guantanamo and their international human rights. While it's a good first step, it's not enough, according to the Special Rapporteur. The current condition at the site, without doubt, amounts to ongoing, cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment, and may also meet the legal threshold for torture. So this is the UN saying this, pretty much, which we know how they feel about torture.
May meet the standard?
May.
Have they seen the pictures?
Yes. Or the musical that's based out of there.
No, I didn't know about that.
There is a Gitmo. There is a Gitmo musical, in case people are wondering. So the grim fact is that indefinite detention and systematic arbitrariness remain a reality at Guantanamo and beyond. The Bush's admin's choice to commit gross human rights violations and of successive administrations before to not reckon with the past has cast a long shadow, resulting in a situation where current and former detainees have been stripped of their most fundamental human rights and are forced to confront an ever-shifting and unpredictable reality that causes continued psychological harm. So the report by the UN Special Rapporteur provides a valuable roadmap for addressing the long-standing concerns surrounding Guantanamo and torture. It emphasizes the need for transparency, accountability, and adherence to international human rights standards, but more importantly calls for the closure of Guantanamo altogether. Today, a finite group of 30 detainees remain, 16 of whom are cleared for transfer. They must be transferred immediately, and the Biden administration must swiftly resolve the cases of those who remain in the failed military commission system. In his statement, Biden said, tortures destroy lives, families, and communities, and followed with examples of heinous methods of torture perpetrated by Russia and Syria. The sad truth is that until 14 years ago, when Barack Obama issued an executive order ending torture as interrogation method, Russian and Syrian could have been replaced with the U.S. throughout the statement, and it would remain factual. That is evident in the Special Rapporteur's report. From the torture methods she notes to the ongoing arbitrary detention and inhumane conditions imposed on detainees by the U.S. after 1911. So they're blaming Russian Syria for torture on American soil. So that's nice.
Wait, how are Syrians torturing on American soil?
Well, he's just saying he's just doing whataboutism classically.
Oh,
right?
okay.
You know, he's just like, oh yeah, Russian Syria, they torture, but you know, like we're kind of also. So,
yeah.
As the UN report notes, torture perpetrated by the U.S. in the name of victims of 9/11 was betrayal of the rights and as victims of terrorism. In fact, 9/11 families have been denied accountability and justice for their loss and suffering for more than 2 decades because of the role of torture in tainting the military commission tribunals at Guantanamo. As former Chief Defense Counsel Brig General John Baker said in a statement to the Senate Judiciary Committee almost 2 years ago, at the heart of the commission's problems is their original sin, torture. From the beginning, justice was an afterthought. So they're saying that even the families that are affected by this can't get justice because, you know, they tortured some folks, essentially. The ongoing failure to completely address that original sin has broken lives and devastated the families of both victims of terrorism and victims of torture. In 21, Biden said torture goes against everything we stand for as a nation, and we must never again resort to its use. Yet, the government's response to the special rapporteur blatantly disregards the reality, in particular, the long-documented deficiencies in medical care, which include broken and inadequate equipment, lack of medical staff, and medical histories devoid of past torture and trauma, among others. Earlier this year, 7 UN experts and the International Committee of the Red Cross also raised concerns about the systematic shortcomings in medical expertise, equipment, treatment, and accommodations at Gitmo. As a special rapporteur pointed out, access to counsel, communication with families, and standing operating procedures are also impacted by the arbitrary nature of the detention regime. Rather than acknowledging and addressing the gaps that exist, administration after administration continues to defend and sustain human rights violations. The U.S. government is being given good counsel by the UN expert, and it is past time that they begin to follow it. So, this rapporteur, Nee Aulane, also called on the U.S. to fulfill its obligations to investigate and prosecute allegations of torture, noting there is no statute of limitations for torture. Anyone who undertook it, facilitated it, legally authorized it, hid it, sustained it, remains liable for torture for the entirety of their lives. While most of us won't hold our breath that most responsible for torture will be prosecuted, the government can and must provide forms of redress immediately. The Biden admin didn't open Guantanamo, but it can close it. They must finish the job rather than continue to delay and continue to sustain the judgment and democracy of the world. The U.S. government owes a formal apology, reparations, and support to the people who they tortured, as well as their families, and they must begin addressing the long-term impacts of these abuses. Hell, they're about to vote in someone who worked there. So, we'll see how that goes. But, closing thoughts, Yeti?
It's just... Let me collect my thought for a second.
Yep. Barack Obama didn't do a damn thing to close Gitmo.
Like it's just everything they always project is what they're doing.
Yeah.
Which leads me to believe that even the most heinous things they've accused others of, they must be doing themselves.
Yep.
Like the fact that Guantanamo Bay is still open, this whole UN thing is, as far as I'm concerned, it's probably just propaganda to make it look like they're doing something. Nothing's going to happen. Like, I fully think the rapporteur is just knowingly just spewing things to make it sound like she did her job.
Well, and she might be doing her job. And this is what happens when you do your job, is that they don't listen to you. They ignore you. I mean, this has been clearly the case for that for a while now. I don't think, I mean, when was a few good men? Like 1980 something?
was gonna say
Like,
maybe 90s.
right, and so we knew of the problems that they had at that facility then. You know, so it's still that way. Nothing's changed. I think it's the fact that some people and government feel like that facility needs to exist for them to torture. That has to be the only reason they keep it.
Well, yeah, and it's also on Cuba territory.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure Cuba does not want them there.
No.
I can almost 100% guarantee that.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I wonder if that's why the States is getting a little itchy with China and Russia potentially putting naval bases there now.
Yeah. I mean, that's partially why we still have Gitmo is because of that, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking, one of the reasons for that, we got this guy. Do you know about this guy? Elliott Abrams, you heard of him?
I know he's a warmonger and he's worked through a couple administrations.
Yeah, worked through. He was Trump guy. Worked through Bush, I think, too.
It looks like the evil guy from the Raccoons show.
Sure. I mean, he definitely looks like one of those off-brand Bond villains, you know, like that Kirkland Bond villain. So is this from Caitlin Johnstone? She writes that presidents keep hiring Elliott Abrams because the U.S. empire is just that evil. That feels like we knew that, Caitlin. So CNN reports that President Biden has nominated criminal neocon Elliott Abrams for a position to the United States Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy. Right, so this is CNN reporting that Caitlin is addressing, which according to the U.S. State Department is responsible for appraising activities intended to understand, inform, and influence foreign publics, and pays acute attention to the U.S. government's official foreign propaganda arm, the U.S. Agency for Global Media. Okay, so that's who this guy's being appointed to, right? When you hear, usually when you hear someone called a neocon, it's not a strictly accurate description from a technical point of view, and it's frequently used to just mean warmonger, but Abrams is actually a proper PNAC neoconservative ideologue with deep ties to the old school neocons of the 1970s and has helped promote violent U.S. imperialism in Latin America and the Middle East for decades. In addition to serving as the Trump administration's special representative for both Iran and Venezuela, two of the nations where Trump's foreign policy was at its most murderous, Abrams is probably best known for confessing to his role in the criminal cover-up of Iran-Contra during the Reagan administration. CNN, notoriously reluctant to criticize both U.S. foreign policy and Democratic presidential administrations, was surprisingly critical on this point in its report on Biden's nomination of Abrams to the position. Right, so here is CNN here, at Kala Walsh responding, Biden is nominating Elliott Abrams, a war criminal, even enough that even CNN points out his role in leading the Iran-Contra operation and supporting U.S.-backed genocidal massacres in Latin America. So here's CNN. Biden has announced its intention to nominate a former appointee under former President Donald Trump with a controversial past in Latin America to the bipartisan United States Advisory Commission on Public Diplomacy. Right? I love how they even whitewash that a bit. This is controversial past. You know?
Yeah.
So
controversial. Illegal murders.
Right. Yeah. They tortured some folks.
Yeah. Well, they murdered some folks too.
Indy's saying PNAC is the Project for New American Century. Cool. Good to know.
New American Century. I've not heard that before.
Yeah, it sounds like a money laundering operation like most of these places.
I mean, that's the whole stock market.
So Elliott Abrams, who has served in 3 Republican administrations, most recently acted as the Trump admin special envoy to Iran and Venezuela, where he was tasked at the time with directing the campaign to replace Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The Republican insider's long history in foreign policy is marked by a 1991 guilty plea for withholding information about the Iran-Contra affair that earned him 2 misdemeanor counts, 2 years probation, and 100 hours of community service. Through his crimes, were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. So just a bit of revolving crime door. He does the crime, next guy pays him off, and then hires him again.
What? The Bush family's involved again.
Right? Darn. The secret Iran-Contra operation, which took place during Abrams' time as an assistant secretary of state in the Reagan administration, involved the funding of anti-communist rebels in Nicaragua using the proceeds from weapon sales to Iran, despite a congressional ban on such funding. That's that classic, we don't fund terrorists.
If communism is so horrible, why are we spending billions to fight it? Surely it would collapse on its own, right? Because
the Russians also fund pretty much. We gotta have someone to fight. God, how un-American of you.
We need someone.
In his role under former President Ronald Reagan, Abrams was also blasted by a Human Rights Watch report for an attempt in a February 1982 Senate testimony to downplay reports of the massacre of 1,000 people by U.S. trained and equipped military units in the Salvadoran town of El Mozote in December 1981, the largest mass killing in recent Latin American history. He insisted the numbers of reported victims were implausible and lavished praise on the military battalion behind the mass killings. Stances he doubled down on when he were put on display during a 2019 House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing by Rep. Ilhan Omar, a Minnesotan Democrat who used his history in Latin America to call into question his credibility. When you're so gross that even CNN is disgusted by you, you're a special kind of gross. So, Yeti, you want to see Ilhan Omar grill this guy? You down for that?
I'm down.
Okay, let's do this, and crank the volume, and action.
Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimonies. Mr. Adams, in 1991, you pleaded guilty to 2 counts of withholding information from Congress regarding your involvement in the Iran-Contra affair, for which you were later pardoned by President George H.W. Bush. I fail to understand why members of this committee or the American people should find any testimony that you give today to be truthful.
If I can respond to that.
It wasn't a question.
On February,
that was not a question. That was I reserve the right to my time.
It is not right.
That was not a question.
Committee can attack
on February 8th,
who is not permitted to reply.
That was not a question. Thank you for your participation. On February 8th, 1982, you testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about U.S. policy in El Salvador. In that hearing, you dismissed as communist propaganda report about the massacre of El Mozote, in which more than 800 civilians, including children as young as 2 years old, were brutally murdered by U.S. trained troops. During that massacre, some of those troops bragged about raping a 12-year-old girl before they killed them. Girls before they killed them. You later said that the U.S. policy in El Salvador was a fabulous achievement. Yes or no, do you still think so?
From the day that President Duarte was elected in a free election to this day, El Salvador has been a democracy. That's a fabulous achievement.
Yes or no, do you think that massacre was a fabulous achievement that happened under our watch?
That is a ridiculous question, and I
yes or no?
No.
I will take that as a yes.
I am not going to respond to that kind of personal attack, which is not a question.
Yes or no, would you support an armed faction within Venezuela that engages in war crimes, crimes against humanity or genocide, if you believe they were serving U.S. interest, as you did in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua?
No, if you could just ask these for other countries that we send military aid to, that'd be great.
I am not going to respond to that question. I'm sorry. I don't think this entire line of questioning is meant to be real questions, and so I will not reply.
Whether under your watch, a genocide will take place, and you will look the other way because American interests were being upheld, is a fair question, because the American people want to know that anytime we engage a country, that we think about what our actions could be and how we believe our values are being furthered. That is my question. Will you make sure that human rights are not violated and that we uphold international and human rights?
I suppose there is a question in there, and the answer is that the entire thrust of American policy in Venezuela is to support the Venezuelan people's effort to restore democracy to their country. That's our policy.
I don't think anybody disputes that. The question I had for you—
A lot of people dispute it, Ilhan.
Is that does the interest of the United States include protecting human rights and include protecting people against genocide?
That is always the position of the United States.
Thank you. I yield back my time.
Says through gritted teeth.
Which United States exactly?
Yeah, because that's not ours. Not ours. You got any more thoughts on this, Yeti? So far?
It's a travesty that these people can continually lie openly to government, to anything they want, and everything kind of backs them up continually, even though the vast majority of the world knows who the problem is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
and they don't seem have any intent on stopping doing that, which is what's going to lead to the global war.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the fact that what did he say at the end? That's always the case in America. We always take care of the human rights and, make sure that we don't have genocides. That's the, what? Like, who said? When? What brochure did you get? But
I mean, America watching safety is like a sex offender watching a kid.
Yeah, they create their own reality, says Indy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's whatever they say it was. So I got a bit more here. So as Forrest noted, this would be the fourth presidential administration that Abrams has been a part of, despite being a confessed crook and despite pushing for bloodshed at every opportunity in some of the U.S. empire's most notorious criminal actions. Abrams is such a cold-hearted killer that he openly admitted during a 1985 conference that the purpose of aiding the Contras in Nicaragua was to, quote, permit people who were fighting on our side to use more violence, end quote. And has promoted U.S. military violence against Iraq, Syria, and Iran with remarkable forcefulness throughout his career. The fact that someone so tyrannical, so corrupt, and so unscrupulous keeps getting appointed to positions involved with U.S. foreign policy tells you everything you need to know about the nature of U.S. foreign policy. It's actually a damning indictment of our entire civilization that swamp monsters like Elliott Abrams remain esteemed members of society instead of revealed outcasts who can't safely show their faces in public. They should be driven from every town they try to enter and unable to secure even entry-level jobs working for minimum wage, but instead they're employed as high-profile pundits, think tankers and political officials providing expertise on some of the most consequential matters in the world. To paraphrase a quote often attributed to Jiddu Krishnamurti, it is no measure of health to be well rewarded in a profoundly sick society. Because our society is so profoundly sick, one of the fastest ways to fortune and esteem is to be as gross as Elliott Abrams. That's how messed up you have to be inside to rise to prominence within the U.S. power structure, willing to say and do whatever needs to be said and done in order to secure the continued dominance of the global empire that is sustained by human blood. So, great stuff from Caitlin there. Couldn't agree more. Pretty much. So
she's exactly right. That's the gist of it. We're controlled by monsters, essentially.
Well, yeah. I mean, in the fact
we were
that
told they were in the closet and they were in front of us the whole time.
Well, and this is a guy that I don't know how people like Biden can get away with this kind of stuff. As far as like, this is someone that was not only in the Trump admin but the Bush admin, and like, shouldn't liberals hate his guts? Like,
yeah.
You know, I don't get why they're allowing him to even get close to a seat anywhere if they have any power to fix
people when they're told. They only hate people when they're told to.
Yeah.
They forget everything about a week later, so.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's the worst, honestly. But
it's
I just find it funny. Well, it's just funny to me at this point that they continue to think that that's acceptable. You know, that's like old political crap.
Oh, it's true. It's just like they're recycling all the same people.
Yeah.
Because they know they'll toe the line, do what they're told.
Pretty much.
And
Snow Himbo in the chat. We have a system that not only rewards narcissism, but removes empathy as one succeeds at it. You are literally at a disadvantage for being a decent person under capitalism. Pretty much.
He's so right. Remember that phrase where it's like, oh, you're too nice.
Right.
Too nice.
Yeah.
Give a homeless guy a sandwich. What's wrong with you people?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Ain't nobody got time for that shit. But anyway.
I'm gonna get the Don Cherry and get fired for you people.
Ugh. You people. They made a whole movie about that. Don't worry about it. You're gonna be all right. Eddie Murphy and Jonah Hill. Anyway,
God.
Speaking of follies, how about we talk about Prigozhin's? I hope that's how you pronounce that dude's name.
Prigozhin.
Prigozhin. And this is from Seymour HERSH. He's writing for Mint Press at the minute. And he wrote this up over on his Substack. The Biden administration had a glorious few days last weekend. The ongoing disaster in Ukraine slipped from the headlines to replaced by the, quote, revolt, as the New York Times headline put it, of Yeti Prigozhin's chief of the mercenary Wagner group. The focus slipped from Ukraine's failing counteroffensive to Prigozhin's threat to Putin's control, as one headline in the Times put it. Revolt raises searing question. Could Putin lose power? Washington Post columnist David Ignatius posed this assessment. Putin looked into the abyss Saturday, and it blinked. He's referencing a Cthulhu thing. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, the administration's go-to wartime flack, who weeks ago spoke proudly of his commitment not to seek a ceasefire in Ukraine, appeared on CBS's Face the Nation with his own version of reality. 16 months ago, Russian forces were thinking they would erase Ukraine from the map as an independent country, Blinken said. Now, over the weekend, they've had to defend Moscow, Russia's capital, against mercenaries of Putin's own making. It was a direct challenge to Putin's authority, and it shows real cracks. This is all Anthony Blinken, right? So, Blinken, unchallenged by his interviewer, Margaret Brennan, as he knew he would not be, why else would he appear on the show, went on to suggest that the defection of the crazed Wagner leader would be a boon for Ukraine's forces, whose slaughter by Russian troops was ongoing as he spoke, to the extent that it presents a real distraction for Putin and for Russian authorities that they have to look at, sort of mind their rear as they're trying to deal with the counteroffensive in Ukraine. I think that creates even greater openings for the Ukrainians to do well on the ground. At this point, was Blinken speaking for Joe Biden? Are we to understand that this is what the man in charge believes? We now know that the chronically unstable Prigozhin's revolt fizzled out within a day as he fled to Belarus with no prosecution guarantee, and his mercenary army was mingled into the Russian army. There was no march on Moscow, nor was there a significant threat to Putin's rule. Pity the Washington columnists and national security correspondents who seemed to rely heavily on official backgrounders with White House and State Department officials. Given the published results of such briefings, those officials seem unable to look at the reality of the past few weeks or the total disaster that has befallen the Ukraine military's counteroffensive. So, below is a look at what is really going that was provided to me by a knowledgeable source in the American intelligence community. I thought I might clear some of the smoke. First and most importantly, Putin is now in a much stronger position. We realized as early as January of 23 that a showdown between the generals, backed by Putin, and Prigo, backed by anti-Russian extremists, was inevitable. The age-old conflict between the special warfighters and a large, slow, clumsy, unimaginative regular army. The army always wins because they own the peripheral assets that make victory, either offensive or defensive, possible. Most importantly, they control logistics. Special forces see themselves as the premier offensive asset. When the overall strategy is offensive, Big Army tolerates their hubris and public chest thumping because SF are willing to take high risk and pay a high price. Successful offense requires a large expenditure of men and equipment. Successful defense, on the other hand, requires husbanding these assets. Wagner members were the spearhead of the original Russian-Ukraine offensive. They were the little green men. When the offense grew into an all-out attack by the regular army, Wagner continued to assist, but reluctantly had to take a back seat in the period of instability and readjustment that followed. Prigo, no shy violet, took the initiative to grow his forces and stabilize his sector. Right? The regular army welcomed the help. Prigo and Wagner, as is the wont of special forces, took the limelight and took the credit for stopping the hated Ukrainians. The press gobbled it up. Meanwhile, the Big Army and Putin slowly changed their strategy from offensive conquest of greater Ukraine to defense of what they already had. Prigo refused to accept the change and continued on the offensive against Bakhmut. Therein lies the rub. Rather than create a public crisis and court-martial the asshole, Moscow simply withheld the resources and let Prigo use up his manpower and firepower reserves, dooming him to a stand-down. He is, after all, no matter how cunning financially, an ex-hot dog cart owner with no political or military accomplishments. Damn. What we never heard is 3 months ago, Wagner was cycled out of Bakhmut front and sent to an abandoned barracks north of Rostov-on-Don, in southern Russia for demobilization. The heavy equipment was mostly redistributed and the force was reduced to about 8,000, 2,000 of which left for Rostov, escorted by local police. Putin fully backed the army, who let Prigo make a fool of himself and now disappeared in an ignominy, all without raising a sweat militarily or causing Putin to face a political standoff with the fundamentalists who were ardent Prigo admirers. Pretty shrewd. There is an enormous gap between the way the professionals in the American intelligence community assesses the situation and what the White House and the supine Washington Press project to the public by uncritically reproducing the statements of Blinken and his hawkish cohorts. Thoughts so far, Yeti? You been following this Prigozhin thing much?
Well, I still feel like there's another story going on. Because at the same time Prigozhin was bringing Wagner down, Akhmat forces also came to meet at Rostodon.
Yeah.
And from Rostodon, if you go along the coast, it's about 100 kilometers to Kiev.
Yeah.
So I kind of think they were, so I kind of think they might have been repositioning some stuff as well.
So he continues to get some information. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it just seems Wagner gave up way too easily.
Yeah, well, I think partially because they didn't have a lot.
And Lukashenko did come in and talk to him too. So. Yeah.
Well, and it's also the fact that
they made another plan as well.
I think they were already decommissioning them, is what it sounds like, and integrating them into the rest of the army. So it was kind of like he didn't have a lot of leverage to do anything with. So he used what he had, which wasn't much.
Yeah.
No,
he didn't have enough fire or manpower. Really.
Yeah, pretty much. That's exactly what happened. So, the current battlefield statistics that were shared with me suggest that the Biden admin's overall foreign policy may be at risk in Ukraine. They also raise questions about the involvement of the NATO alliance, which has been providing the Ukrainian forces with training and weapons for the current lagging counteroffensive. I learned that in the first 2 weeks of the operation, the Ukraine military seized only 44 square miles of territory previously held by the Russian army, much of it open land. In contrast, Russia is now in control of 40,000 square miles of Ukrainian territory. I have been told that in the past 10 days, Ukrainian forces have not fought their way through the Russian defenses in any significant way. They have recovered only 2 more square miles of Russian seized territory. At that pace, one informed official said, waggishly, it would take Zelensky's military 117 years to rid the country of Russian occupation. Right? The Washington press in recent days seems to be slowly coming to grips with the enormity of the disaster, but there's no public evidence that President Biden and his senior aides in the White House and State Department aides understand the situation. Putin now has within his grasp total control, or close to it, of the 4 Ukrainian oblasts, Donetsk, Kherson, Lubansk, and Zaporizhia, right? Zaporizhia, that he publicly annexed.
Zaporizhia.
Yeah, that's where that nuke,
the nuclear facility.
Yeah. So 7 months after he began the war, the next step, assuming there is no miracle on the battlefield, will be up to Putin. He could simply stop where he is and see if the military reality will be accepted by the White House, and whether a ceasefire will be sought with formal end-of-war talks initiated. There will be a presidential election next April in Ukraine, and the Russian leader may stay put and wait for that. If it takes place, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine has said there will be no elections while the country is under martial law. Of course. Biden's political problems in terms of next year's presidential election are acute and obvious. On June 20th, the Washington Post published an article based on a Gallup poll under the headline, Biden shouldn't be as unpopular as Trump, but he is. The article, accompanied the poll by Perry Bacon Jr., said that Biden has almost universal support within his own party, virtually none from the oppositional party, and terrible numbers among independents. Biden, like previous Democratic presidents, Bacon wrote, struggles to connect with younger and less engaged voters. Bacon had nothing to say about Biden's support for the Ukraine war because the poll apparently asked no questions about the administration's foreign policy. Of course not. The looming disaster in Ukraine and its political implications could be a wake-up call for those Democratic members of Congress who support the president but disagree with his willingness to throw many billions of goods, money after bad in Ukraine in the hope of miracle that will not arrive. Democratic support for the war is another example of the party's growing disengagement from the working class. It's their children who have been fighting the wars of the recent past and may be fighting in any future wars. These voters have turned away in increasing numbers as the Democrats move closer to the intellectual and moneyed classes. There's any doubt about the continuing seismic shift in current policies, I recommend a good dose of Thomas Frank, the acclaimed author of the 2004 bestseller, What's the Matter with Kansas? How Conservatives Won the Heart of America, a book that explained why the voters of the state turned away from the Democratic Party and voted against their economic interests. Frank did it again in 2016 in his book Listen Liberal, or Whatever Happened to the Party of the People. In an afterword to the paperback edition, he depicted how Hillary Clinton and the Democratic Party amplified the mistakes made in Kansas en route to losing a sure-thing election to Donald Trump. It may be prudent for Joe Biden to talk straight about the war and its various problems for America, and to explain why the estimated more than $150 billion that his administration has put up thus far turned out to be a very bad investment they literally can't keep track of. Closing thoughts, Yeti?
The whole Ukraine thing is just absolutely a mess now. And the issue for Ukraine now is, like SEYMOUR HERSH wrote in his article, they've spent the last 6 months building like defensive structures, and Ukraine hasn't even like really hit the first line of their actual defenses.
Right.
Like they're so far back of anything.
Yeah. Well, it's
like there's no hope for Ukraine winning ever at this point.
I mean, they said from the what does winning to them even look like at this point? You know, so
well, according to Zelensky, it's all of Crimea and all the annexed territories.
Yeah.
So I don't know how he's going to feasibly do that.
Paper airplanes at people, like.
Yeah,
you know,
like he's trying to erase the whole Ukrainian people at this point.
I guess
because they're gonna start like enlisting women as well, forced enlisting.
Well, they've already been putting like 80-year-olds in tanks and putting them on the front lines. Like they're not.
Oh, they tried to put a guy who's blind.
Yeah.
Like, what are you people thinking? What kind of sadistic thoughts you have to be like, you know what, we're losing, let's throw this blind guy in to make it look like we're doing something.
Yeah, I mean it's bad, it's real bad, but I don't see how they. I mean, you see the things in France happening, protests in France, people are going to stop sending their money over there.
Yeah.
So
well, I think Zelensky's gonna eventually get taken out by someone on the inside.
Well,
either at the behest of Russia or the USA. Sure. Either one will probably want to get rid of him now. So,
or he may escape and settle somewhere in Argentina like the last guy.
I think he can run. He's too well known now.
Yeah,
I think even with a good disguise, someone will figure it out.
Yeah,
someone will rat him out.
Well,
I don't think he has a hope of running anywheres, to be honest.
We'll see. I hope it works out what's best for the people. That's what I hope. So
well, that's what you want. You want Ukrainians to stop dying. You want Russians to stop dying.
That would be ideal.
I want foreign mercenaries to stop dying as well.
Well, you see,
we go back to that. Please.
We have to have a war, and if Ukraine's not going to do it for us, we're going to have to head over here to China. We've been ramping up our narrative management on that country now as well. I don't know if you've been seeing that, but
I think, remember how like people used to say Russia said they were going to do Kiev in 3 days, which was the American military anyways.
Right.
China might be able to take Taiwan in 3 days.
Yeah. Like
they're just mass production power of like producing drones, artillery, weapons, boats, everything.
Yep. They have quite a bit of resource control. So this is from Kit Clarenberg, writing for Mint Press News. Right, and he wants to expose the false witnesses and sinister plots in exposing the CIA connection in the Chinese police station narrative. You been seeing anything on this Chinese police station, Yeti? It's been part of the.
I seen it a couple months ago. I had seen some kind of like brief mention.
Yep.
But honestly, I was like, I'm not even going to read into this one. I already know what's going on here.
For months, mainstream media across the Western world, and particularly English language outlets based in the constituent members of the Five Eyes global spying network, I'm still waiting for Six Eyes to come out, have been rapidly awash with terrifying news of secret Chinese police stations operating the world over. Right? Have you heard this nonsense? It's totally that we don't have American police stations operating the world over to the tune of all of our military bases.
I'm like, New York City, its own, has police departments around the world.
Yes, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It is claimed these stations are unofficial, covert Chinese Communist Party security and intelligence cells concealed in private businesses run by Chinese immigrants, such as restaurants. From behind benign facades, they surveil and harass pro-democracy expats, among other nefarious activities. So that's what they're claiming these do. By contrast, Beijing denies their existence, claiming purported examples to merely be adenine initiatives constructed by regional public security bureaus during the COVID-19 pandemic. They are primarily said to offer Chinese citizens overseas administrative services, such as driving license renewal. These denials have fallen on deaf ears, and the narrative of dastardly communists operating cloak and dagger foreign spy bases in order to egregiously extend China's authoritarian tendrils overseas has ever gained in currency. In April, the FBI pounced upon a Chinese police station in Lower Manhattan, New York, based in the offices of a charitable organization established in 1998 to assist Chinese nationals from Shanghai, Fujian, a region of southeast China. Subsequently, the U.S. Department of Justice indicted 2 of the organization's leading members for conspiring to act as agents of the PRC and obstruction of justice after allegedly deleting encrypted check records from their smartphones that indicate they were in direct regular contact with Chinese officials. They face up to 25 years in prison each if convicted of these offenses. So that's what they're doing there. I mean, we've heard of this. This sounds
probably
like
one of their uncles that they were just talking about dinner or something.
Well, yeah, but
no, you contacted him.
This is, they're trying to get around you using encrypted stuff to begin with. The fact that you had it, you could have deleted it pretty much. Like, that's what they're, and this sounds like FARA stuff as well, foreign agent relation crap.
Okay.
That they're using. The PRC, though its repressive security apparatus established a secret physical presence in New York City to monitor and intimidate dissidents and those critical of its government. The Justice Department National Security Division fulminated at the time. The PRC's actions go far beyond the bounds of acceptable nation-state conduct. We will resolutely defend the freedoms of all those living in our country from the threat of authoritarian repression. When you've been doing that? So shocking stuff. One might go ahead.
No, it's kind of amazing that they'll talk about. Sorry, go ahead.
What? That they'll talk about? Yeah, that it's like they'll talk
like
about
they
these
continue
threat of authoritarian nonsense when
I remember my thought now. Yeah. So according to this, allegedly, what they're saying is the Chinese, the Communist Party of China controls all Chinese people. That's what they're trying to allege here. Like, how fucking ridiculous.
Well, yes. They're also stating that this specific charity that has kind of always been doing this, that they were like established in 98 to do this particular thing, and then here comes the NSD coming like, oh yeah, but you're some Chinese people, so
you're a spy.
You
probably control the weather balloon too.
Literally, I mean, it's just like what they did with Russian business people here. Shocking stuff, one might think. But while an official press release on the raid repeatedly referred to the clandestine nature of the secret police station, in reality it was openly and widely advertised as somewhere Chinese citizens in New York City could conveniently access administrative services remotely. Meanwhile, the indictment's details make it clear the only state apparatus with which the pair were in contact belonged to the Chinese Ministry of Public Security's Traffic Management Center. They're literally, this is like them, their fucking, like, Department of Transportation.
These Americans here, they've got these things called traffic lights. Have we heard of them yet? Like, what?
It's like, I need my
sign?
ID.
I don't know.
That's pretty much what it is.
Did we figure that out yet?
Like,
yeah, like,
I gotta get a copy of my driver's license.
China is so far advanced past the States that I don't know what they could possibly try to steal from them at this point.
So here it is. The glass facade building in New York's Chinatown was among hundreds around the world accused of housing secret Chinese spy bases. This place, this little, is literally glass built, like it's a glass fronted building. Like they're doing secret clandestine meetings in like.
I know when I like to have. I know when I make spy meetings, I like to have nice light flow, please.
Right? Yeah, I
really
need that natural light.
Yeah,
you know, like, new sunlight building. Like this Marriott seems like a better option for clandestine meetings than that crap. So, similarly, underwhelming results have been produced by official investigations in other countries into the alleged plague. On June 6th, UK Security Minister Tom Tugendhat announced the result of police probes into 3 separate alleged CPC security outposts in London and Scotland. Police have visited each of the locations and carefully looked into these allegations to consider whether any laws have been broken, whether any further action should be taken. I can confirm that police have not to date identified any evidence of illegal activity on behalf of the Chinese state across these sites, right? So these findings were no doubt extremely disappointing for safeguard defenders, which alerted UK authorities to the police stations. Still, it is unlikely the organizations will be deterred from its anti-China crusade or reconsider its position as dependable false witness for Western governments, as we shall see. Safeguard defenders, which is likely tied to a notorious CIA front, is the sole source of the Chinese police station hysteria that has engulfed Europe, North America, and elsewhere. Its founder has a highly dubious history of conducting U.S. state-funded destabilization operations in China, and the organization is no stranger to slandering individuals and organizations as embroiled in sinister communist plots to their immense personnel, professional, and political detriment. In the process,
those pesky communists.
Oh, the damn commies. In the process, the lives of countless innocent Chinese citizens residing abroad have been made miserable. Already surging levels of hatred for East Asians in the West gravely escalated, and further foundations for an all-out war between the U.S. empire and Beijing dangerously laid. Phrasing. The avowed origins of safeguard defenders date back to 2009, when self-titled Swedish human rights activist Peter Dahlin founded the Chinese Urgent Action Working Group to support China's fledgling lawyer community, conduct legal interventions in service of these objectives. It established a nexus of pro bono legal aid centers in rural areas of China, serving the needs of local communities. Because these cases often concerned the rampant abuse and violation of laws by local police and government, safeguard defenders assert, China Action was forcibly shuttered in 2016. Beijing targeted it in a major crackdown, which led to many of its staff being detained, disappeared, and imprisoned, including Dahlin. The foundation for Safeguard Defenders was laid that same year, inherited the mission of China Action, but with an expanded scope to support the survival and effectiveness of civil society and human rights defenders in some of Asia's most hostile environments, and was publicly launched in 2017. So here we go. Here's the screenshots from the About Us page of self-avowed human rights NGO Safeguard Defenders. So what we got, the People's Republic of the Disappeared, right? Stories from China's system for enforced disappearances. And then Trial by Med, China's new show trials and the global expansion of Chinese media. What's this one? Scripted and Staged, behind the scenes of China's forced televised confessions. Right? So that's what they're putting up. Right? So, absent from this romantic autobiography is any reference to the raid on China action being precipitated by the organization receiving vast sums from the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, in secret over several years to promote and conduct destabilizing lawfare operations. In the process, limited local disputes over matters such as land rights were transformed into weapons against the CPC. The NED's own senior officials openly admit they do overtly what the CIA once did covertly, and their track record of financing lawfare in enemy countries is long and shameful. For example, in September 2003, the Washington-based Center for Justice and International Law was granted over $80,000 by the NED to encourage and train Venezuelans to launch legal actions against their government via the Inter-American Commission and the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, an obscure but potent U.S. and Costa Rica-based legal nexus that claims jurisdiction over the entirety of the Americas. This led to a dramatic increase in frivolous human rights claims brought against Caracas by right-wing opposition activists, all of which circumvented the country's legal system and undermined its sovereignty, granting power of judgment to a hostile, foreign-run body. In recent years, the NED has also bankrolled Ukrainian media, sponsored a coup attempt in Cuba, funneled money to the leaders of the Hong Kong protests, and attempted to topple the Belarusian government. Dalin was temporarily transformed into an international human rights celebrity as a result of his 23-day-long incarceration, which culminated in him confessing on state TV, forcibly, he says, to having acted illegally and hurt the feelings of the Chinese people before being deported back to Sweden and banned from returning for 10 years. It is a story he has told many times since to Western media outlets. You want to hear his story, Yeti? Here. Anything to add before we get into his stuff?
No, I think I'll wait
to
see what he says.
I have no complaints to make. I think my treatment has been fair. My treatment has taken special circumstances into consideration, considering, for example, a unique medical condition. I've been given good food, plenty of sleep, and I have suffered no mistreatment of any kind. And I've also been given the opportunity to meet with representatives from my embassy.
而对于自己过去一段时间以来在中国的所作所为，彼得表示十分后悔。
I violated Chinese law through my activities here. I have caused harm to the Chinese government. I have hurt the feelings of the Chinese people. I apologize sincerely for this, and I am very sorry that this ever happened.
在提的是
I have been made aware, become aware, that certain people that we have supported at one time or another have gone on to do acts in clear violation of the law. And we know that in some cases, such as Su Shanglan or Xing Xingxian, there have been very serious crimes. And we are also aware that that also means that we as an organization become criminally liable for the things that they have done. I once supported Wang Xuanjiang, who has now been arrested and facing trial for causing harm to national security. Xing Xingxian, who I once supported, have broken the law. He illegally brought the son of lawyer Wang Yu across an international border.
对于上述情况，彼得供认不讳。他还说，他将支持他们发起针对政府的诉讼。
For someone like Wang Xuanjiang, when he was working on a specific project, we would pay him 5,000 kwai per month for a year. When it comes to licensed lawyers taking on difficult cases, a standard fee that we could pay them would be about 20,000 RMB for a case.
Well, he's essentially admitting they fucked up.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
I don't buy that he was forced into that. He looks in too good of health to be mistreated.
Yeah, I mean...
Like, he doesn't look swollen, he doesn't look tired.
Like, I think it's more that, like, he was forced into doing the business he was doing. You know?
I got you.
So, but, like, that...
I misunderstood that.
Well, I think it's a bit of both, right? That he was forced into making a statement, but, you know, his statement was, like, essentially, like, yeah, I did what I did. What it sounds like. But we have a bit more. So in 2017, The Guardian reported that the trauma Dahlin experienced behind bars in a secret prison gave him a first-hand taste of the harshness with which Chinese President Xi Jinping's battle for control is being waged. It was, however, noted he had lived in China for 7 years with the daily stress of concealing his work. The obvious question of why this would be necessary if China Action's activities were legal and proper was not explored. More curiously still, Dahlin's testimony strongly suggests his treatment by Chinese authority was far more cordial than he could expect to receive were he to run a confidential Beijing-funded operation stateside, training lawyers to legal actions against U.S. government agencies. Dahlin was apparently able to refuse their demand that he labels 3 associates criminals in his televised confession with consequences. Police took care to kennel his various cats at some expense during his imprisonment, and all of his confiscated property was eventually returned to him, save for some money they used to book him a first-class, one-way plane ticket home to Stockholm. Once seated on that flight, he was given a free glass of champagne. Bro, he got first-class ticket in Champagne.
Dude, they watched his cat while he was in jail.
yeah, dude, they took care of Whiskers, bro.
This is the worst authoritarian government ever.
Do
they even know what they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, this is not authoritarian. This is downright hospitable.
Yeah.
In a lengthy 2017 interview with the Western-backed anti-communist Hong Kong Free Press, Dahlin downplayed the significance of the NED's financing of China Action, claiming it was limited to a few $100,000 through the 5 years the program ran. So, yeah, such sums is still developing and in some areas extremely poor country with a low cost of living and appropriate minimum wage of just $360 per month today would go a very, very long way indeed. This is without factoring in European Union backing for China Action activities, which Dahlin revealed was his organization's largest donor. He was catching money kickback from the EU. Notably, the EU has an NED of its own, the European Endowment for Democracy, which is explicitly inspired by its American counterpart. The police swoop on China Action came at a time when the governments the world over, particularly those for which Washington reserves a particular animus, were beginning to take action to limit or outright ban the NED's activities within their borders for the first time. This followed a decade and a half of the endowment often boastfully fomenting color revolutions with total impunity across the former Yugoslav and Soviet sphere, culminating in the violent armed Maidan coup in Ukraine in 2014. As Dahlin repeatedly underlined to the Hong Kong Free Press, his interrogators were overwhelmingly concerned with comprehending precisely what his organization was up to and how it operated, while one may quite reasonably condemn the heavy-handedness with which he was apparently targeted. It is understandable that Chinese authorities were intensely curious, particularly given that, as the website of Safeguard Defenders openly acknowledges, China Action worked quietly behind the scenes and deliberately kept a low profile throughout its existence. By contrast, Safeguard Defenders is an extremely public outfit by design. Its funding is much more opaque, beyond interdiment PayPal indeterminate PayPal donations. God, brains. Its income consists of grants retained through competition and open calls from international institutions, foundations and governments, development assistance programs. The figures involved and from where they flow are not stated. Moreover, for safety reasons, most staff and partners are kept anonymous. Nonetheless, it may be noted that the organization has been promoted by NED's daily blog, Dim Digest, as well as well-remunerated endowment grant recipient China Action previously. In a May 2022 post, the organ announced Safeguard Defenders had opened an office in Taiwan, its first in Asia. Taipei was said to be an obvious choice because of its open society and geographic proximity. Yeah, to Taiwan. Taiwan may have also represented an ideal location for far darker reasons. 6 months earlier, Bloomberg published a report in which nameless CIA officials bemoaned how surveillance measures and a crackdown on corruption by state officials in China had made it virtually impossible for the agency to meet with and or bribe government informants. This very sadly produced a lack of top-tier intelligence on Chinese President Xi Jinping's inner circle. Consequently, the agency was considering whether to deploy China specialists in locations outside China in the hope that overseas destinations prove a more fertile recruitment environment than the closely surveilled streets of Beijing. It is surely no coincidence that subsequently several deep state-linked NGOs and think tanks promptly set up shop in Taiwan, where NED-funded entities have for some time regularly convened events attended by endowment bankrolled pro-democracy separatists from Hong Kong, Tibet, and Xinjiang. In the years since its founding, Safeguard Defenders have issued a steady stream of reports on alleged human rights abuses in China. However, it was not until September 2022, with the release of 110 overseas China's transnational policing gone wild, that it gained serious public prominence due to the international media frenzy over Chinese police stations that immediately erupted thereafter. 2 months later, the organization bragged this report had spurred 14 separate countries to investigate stations operating on their soil: Austria, Canada, Chile, Czechia, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Nigeria, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, and the Netherlands. UK and the US. Buried at the bottom was the somewhat inconvenient fact 16 other governments were yet to respond to the reports of PRC overseas police service centers on their territories. In other words, they ignored the crazed pronouncements of Safeguard Defenders. Oh no, not ignoring them. As we saw, the UK investigation came to absolutely nothing. Nonetheless, in the 8 months between its investigation and lackluster conclusion, the life of at least one individual caught up in imbroglio was made hell. Ryu Lin is the founder of All Eat, a restaurant delivery app, one of the businesses tagged as a police station by Safeguard Defenders. Speaking to his local newspaper in May this year, he recounted how he feared for his family's safety due to frequent accusations in the street of being secret police. Constant stares from passerby, maybe 20 to 30 people per day, endlessly ringing his office doorbell, and a journalist grilling his son en route to school about whether he was a spy. Could you imagine? Like,
just ridiculous.
Dude. So the stress induced by his experiences has left Lin, who moved to the UK when aged 18, and professes to love his adopted homeland as much as his country of birth, unable to eat or sleep properly. He claims to have lost customers and investors since the allegations against his enterprise emerged, and he was variously described by the newspapers as visibly distressed and trembling at times with the effort required to keep his emotions in check. Well, yeah. Like, Wang Haijun speaks to the media after his restaurant in southern Seoul was accused of being a secret Chinese police station. So here's the actual event there. The impact on Chinese immigrant communities of administrative centers upon which they frequently depend, being stigmatized, if not outright shut down to the interventions of Safeguard Defenders, is just as devastating, if not more so. In late April, The Royal Canadian Mounted Police claim to have closed a network of police stations in British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec. One of the organizations affected, the Chinese Family Service, said the people they serve have suffered enormously, adding, community members have been unable to obtain life-saving services they need. This has placed vulnerable members of the Chinese community at risk, impacting our community's livelihoods and quality of life. Our mandate is to help with the integration of new immigrants, to offer fringe courses, to get our seniors out of isolation, to help women victims of violence, and contribute to poverty reduction. So that's what they're doing there up in Ontario and Quebec. It is a perverse, twisted irony that Dahlin has repeatedly claimed his objective in establishing China Action was to improve the rule of law in Beijing and enhance legal protections for average citizens. Presumption of innocence, due process, and the right to a fair trial are all inalienable legal principles in any democracy worthy of the name, yet safeguard defenders eagerly encourage the gross contravention of these fundamental tenets in pursuit of demonizing Beijing in the eyes of Western citizens. Western authorities are only too happy to collude, it seems. Ominously, UK Security Minister Tom Tugendhat attributed the inability of detectives to uncover the criminal conduct at the sites they investigated as an indication police and public scrutiny has had a suppressive impact on any administrative functions these sites may have had. Clearly, in the new Cold War, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence where China is, one way or another, involved. Gravely, we can expect alarmism over any and all things Chinese in Europe and North America to intensify significantly moving forward. The obvious utility of the police station PSYOP is that it provides Western warhawks plausible grounds to accuse Beijing of hostile meddling abroad. At a time the CPC remains so doggedly committed to non-interference in other nations' affairs, they refuse to intervene overseas, even when government asks them to, and their own Silk Road infrastructure is under attack. As Mint Press News has previously revealed, British intelligence for many years prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine ceaselessly spread black propaganda falsely linking the Kremlin to Brexit, the election of Donald Trump as president, and other adverse domestic political developments in the West. In process, these events and phenomena were transformed into direct, deliberate attacks by Moscow, demanding a belligerent response from target governments. Were it not for those machinations, that war might well have been avoided, with U.S. military chiefs now openly discussing all-out conflict against China with alarming regularity. They need to concoct a pretext for that horrific eventuality grows daily. Chinese police stations are just the latest salvo in an information war intended to place the U.S. empire and its international vassals on an inevitable, world-threatening trajectory. Of course, safeguard defenders had no comment. Yeti, in case you were worried.
Of course they didn't. Why would they want to back up anything they say?
Because
it's just disgusting, because it's the same thing they did to the Muslims
around
around 9/11. They just kept making sure people would hate them. It's doing the same thing again, man.
And you just make shit up.
Learn. Yep.
You know. So, but yep. That's terrible news. More manufacturing consent for another war we need. This time with China, as we've all kind of said would be the case. Spooky's here. Spooky.
I don't know how they think they'd ever win a war with China, but
because they think we somehow have a better military than that. Like, part of it is we've been focusing on what's called supremacy, right?
Yeah.
With our military. So we think we can actually do that. That we have more bigger, badder military than everyone else combined, right? The issue is that they've not been putting as much funding into their militaries. They could put more, but
they just want to collect profits now.
Yeah, it's not like that they don't have one. They have one, and it can definitely compete, you know, is just not competing in as many places as we are. So
yeah.
But yeah, I feel like all our stories kind of blended together with that. It's U.S. doing what U.S. does terribly as always. So, but people can find you, Yeti. You're on the Twitters, right? You know,
I'm on the Twitter. I'm on the Telegram.
At Yeti1181 on Twitter, right? I think we have your Linktree in the chat, so people can find your Telegram and stuff on there. You do good work over there.
Thank you.
So
thank you very much.
Go check out Yeti on Misty. That was great. I think we've got I have schedule. So today is what? Wednesday. So tomorrow Bread and Circuses around 9. Friday Handsome Cynic's gonna be going 12:45. And then I think we're doing a Tara Politics or Survival. So Tara Reid should be joining us Friday for her show. So first one we've done from Russia from her. So we'll see how that goes. Everyone go check out Bread and Circuses tomorrow. And Bitch with Common Misty on Saturday if all things go well.
Always a good show.
Yep. And Boat Smashing into Other Boats we aired yesterday. If you missed last Sunday night's How Do We Miss That Boats, you can check it out then. We're normally going to be doing that Fridays, I think.
Okay.
So keep an eye out for that. So if you ever missed How Do We Miss That live from the week before, just wait till Friday. And it'll be up there. So yeah. I think that's it.
All right.
I'm sure I'm forgetting something.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, dude. Always a pleasure. Anytime you want to show up. Anything you want to plug before we head out?
No, I think I've plugged most of my stuff.
Cool.
For now. I'm going to start writing articles on Substack, though.
Sounds perfect.
But I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do yet.
Great. Well, hopefully you're avoiding Canadian fires and Mounties are not riding by your place. You know?
Nope. Not currently.
Just don't avoid ordering Chinese food so that you don't get put on any police station list, you know? So but anyway, I think that's it here for today. So everyone go check out Yeti stuff. You can find all the links to all members of INN at indienews.network. Scrolling down there, it's in the link below. You can find all the members for that. And you know, Yeti's one of those members, so you should be able to find his stuff there as well as all the links to all the network stuff that you probably aren't following, like Rumble and Rockfin. So, you know, go check that stuff out. But otherwise, you know, keep liking stuff. We appreciate it. But I think we're gonna call it a night, Yeti. You ready to head out of here?
Peace. I gotta go eat some dinner.
Sounds perfect. So, as always, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.